Hey everybody, welcome back to VideoMess. So, Technology series, is that an analog in your pocket? Are you just happy to see me? And today I am here with the new Game Boy and Game Boy Color cores. Buddude 2 has released two new alternate cores for Game Boy and Game Boy Color, unlocking all of the different screen filters in OpenFPGA, giving us a fast forward function and some preliminary work towards a real-time clock as well that would go towards working for a few games. But it's always great to get alternative cores. What I'm going to go over today is all the new features in them, how to make sure you get them on your pocket, and all the benefits thereafter. Because you absolutely want all of the screen filters available in their OpenFPGA, so you don't need to move around with Game Boy Studio and try to patch different games to be a .pocket format. The one thing you do need to do though, if you want these, you can manually install them on GitHub, but Pocket Updater seems to be bringing them down as well. I use the Update All feature just to make sure that your Pocket is always current with all of the new arcade, console, and handheld cores, and it brought down the most recent core, 1.0.5, so just run Pocket Updater and you should be totally fine. And then when you know you have it right, go into OpenFPGA and go under handheld cores. You should see a 2 next to Game Boy and Game Boy Color, and you can select the core under change core. You'll see Buddude 2 here is going to have a 1.0.5, and then you have the spiritualized core, which is more of the default OpenFPGA core. And as we move into Game Boy Color with Street Fighter Alpha, I will say having all of these screen filters available to you in the OpenFPGA format is just absolutely spectacular, because so much of what FPGA gaming development is about is choice. It gives you the ability to play your games how you want them to be played, and it gives you the ability to have them look however you would like as well. So having all of these filters available under OpenFPGA cores is awesome, and there's so many different looks, some of which you've gone over in previews past when we went to 2.0 on Analogue OS, but this is just so much better. It gives you the freedom to do whatever you'd like. You can make it look better, you can make it look worse, you can go and take a color game and turn it black and white. You can literally do whatever you would like within the OpenFPGA core from Buddude 2, and it is absolutely a fun time. And I will get to the fast forward feature as well, because that's actually my new favorite feature. Some of the Game Boy and Game Boy Color intros take forever to get through, and having fast forward is a ton of fun. But you'll see here in Street Fighter Alpha, that little bit of a grid over the top with the light just works perfectly fine. But if you wanted to go to grayscale, you could totally do that. You have all of these different options to be able to have the game look however you want. Obviously, this is not how the game ever should have looked, but it's still a fun kind of vibe, and it does work within the context of the game. Now you'll see here as I just play around, there's a look for everybody, and make sure you go into mode settings, because each filter is going to have different toggleable options under there. And if we do some frame blending, you're going to see now on the screen, it's going to be a little bit smearier, like it is original LCD technology from Game Boy Color or from Game Boy, because they did not have the fastest response rate. Now I'm not going to show you much of the fast forward, because it usually just creates a mess on the screen and a lot of flashing lights, but under controls, the right shoulder button is going to be bound to fast forward. When you hold this down, the core just starts wildly running faster than it ever would before, and you can even enable a fast forward sound if you would so like. But something like the intro to Wario Land 2 here takes like 2 minutes to get through, so having the fast forward function if you don't want to sit around and watch a cutscene is going to be an awesome time. But again, all of the filters on the Game Boy Color side, there's so many different visual things you can do, and I'm so happy to see that we're starting to get some alternate cores on the OpenFPGA side that are giving you more of the ability to play around with games how you like them to. That is just so much fun. And if we pop into the menu here under core settings and under display, you're going to see all of the different things we can do. You can just go to normal, which turns everything off. But I will say, outside of capture, this looks spectacular on the actual Analogue Pocket screen. This is one of my favorite screens ever to be set into a handheld, and the quality of the filters here when you get in game is just incredible. I'm sure it's going to be a little bit hard if you're watching on a phone to resolve the lines and pixels over top the screen, but if you look closely, if you're watching on a TV, it should be easy. You'll see just how incredible this looks on the Analogue Pocket. The filters are fun for televisions and dock, and they're fun for videos, but honestly, really play these things handheld to get the maximum effect out of them. Something like R-Type here on the Game Boy Color with the filter over top just looks stunning. This is so much better in my opinion than having it on normal mode where you don't have any of the filtration over the top. But that's the great thing. Again, you'll see I played with fast forward there. You get to decide what works for you. These do not affect gameplay whatsoever. They are just visual enhancements and visual changes. So if it looks good to you and you are happy, then I am totally happy for you. That's the great thing about all of these options and alternative cores. It's just a new way to do the exact same thing, and a lot of people have a lot of fun with that. But tell me down below if you use the filters, if you just go with normal mode, because I would be curious. And again, don't forget you do need Pocket Updater to have these. But let's go from the Game Boy Color core over to the original Game Boy core and talk about what it looks like over there. And again, remember, when you go into handhelds, you should see a 2 next to Game Boy. If you haven't yet set this core as the default, you need to select it, or else these options are not all going to be available to you. And I know that trips some people up when they haven't yet switched cores. As you move over to Metroid here, with that grayscale grid line over the top, it is just a different type of look. Now honestly, on the Game Boy side, not Game Boy Color, I actually prefer the normal mode in most games. There's something about the different color shifts that just don't really do it to me. And honestly, that green kind of color over the top is just not my favorite thing in the world. But the great part is you get to decide what is your favorite and you get to run with it. And honestly, you may decide that in one game you like one filter and in another game you don't like it whatsoever. You'll see we can go to normal. You could even play around with the Trinitron filters if you want. You can go to grayscale. You can go to the original Game Boy DMG color profile. You can even put filters on top that are more meant for other cores like the Game Boy Color. And I think this actually has a better look to it than if I had used the Game Boy filters in and of themselves. I like the tighter grid line and aperture mask here, even though that's not really the correct term to use because we are talking about LCD technology. This just has the vibe that I'm going for. It's got a little bit of screen smear as well. It does make it look like it's running on older LCD technology from the 80s and 90s versus what you're watching this on today. But again, it's just the versatility and being able to do whatever you want that really makes these things so special. You can play around with any sort of setting, any sort of filter, and create a look you want. And now you don't have to be in Game Boy Studio with specialized files to be able to unlock absolutely everything. It's been a lot of movement on Analogue Pocket in 2023 at the end and 2024, and I can't wait to see what else comes because you're getting so many more options that people have been waiting years for. All of a sudden the floodgates opened. But taking a look at Donkey Kong here, you'll see this is just normal mode. There are no filters over top whatsoever. So let's go in and play around a little bit. I want you to understand what all of these different things can do. If we go to the Game Boy Color LCD Plus, it's going to put the grid line over the top and it's going to be nice and tight. But if you go to original Game Boy Pocket, you're going to get the color shift of what the Pocket would have done versus the original Game Boy. These are all just replicating looks of older hardware, and you'll see here if you turn on fast forward in the core, again everything's going to shake quicker. Remember, fast forward is in both cores. But this green hue is just so nostalgic, and I do think it helps round out some of the edges of having it on normal mode in some instances. Normal can be a little bit too bright with all of the whites, so putting this mask on top and color shifting more towards a bluish green teal helps the game's art and just helps on your eyes as well. But that's the thing, you can do whatever you want, you can switch it back to normal, and you have a completely different look. You get to decide what works for you. You can go to integer plus, and because of the size of the screen, sometimes that works better than just being on integer. But you can even go to Scanlines and CRT mode with the Trinitron filters, although those really aren't endemic to this core. But BudDude 2 has done some great work here. Real-time clock support, fast forward support, all of the filters open and available to you right off the top. It is just a really good time because before this you could do it on Analogue Pocket, but you had to go through some tricky steps which I explained in a previous video, and you can still do that. You can go over to GB Studio and do play creations and load your own games up into here, and you can get patches for different Game Boy games so that allow you to be able to do that. I just think now with BudDude 2's core in OpenFPGA, this is going to eliminate a lot of this patching, and it's going to save you a lot of time, and that's what matters. More time to play fun games, less time fiddling around. But if you haven't updated your Analogue Pocket recently, definitely use Pocket Updater and make sure you grab these cores. I think they are some of the best stuff on the Analogue Pocket, and again, these filters look so much better in handheld mode. The dock on a 4K television is a ton of fun, but honestly for me, handheld on Pocket for Game Boy and Game Boy Color is where it's at. If you run into any problems updating, leave me a comment down below and I'll see if I can help. But otherwise, go start playing these cores today. They are 10 out of 10 good. I'll see you next week for more Pocket. Otherwise, we're done. Bye-bye.